All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joshua. I'm going to be your presenter today for today's webinar, Payroll, Understanding Payroll Reports. I'd like to welcome everyone. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on our topics. Let me go ahead and get my introduce my highlighter friend here right away. Our current version of payroll is 2014. I'm not sure, maybe everybody can see that right here. Maybe draw a big arrow there pointing down. Payroll 2014. We do have a service release or patch available for this version that's available now. Okay, SR1, if we go to churchwindows.com, and let me get rid of my drawings there. And we go to our download updates page. We see down here at the very bottom, let me get out my drawing tool again, Church Windows Payroll SR1 update. Doesn't really update too terribly many things, but right under what's new in Payroll 2014 SR1, it opens up a PDF file and it shows clearly we've got a 944 update to the 2014 form. The 2014 W4 form, which is important, of course, if you get those updated every year. And if you are hiring any new employees, you'll want to get those completed. So make sure that you get this for, if nothing else, those two forms. And if you're unaware of it and you're from any of the following states that are listed below here, Missouri, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Oregon, or Vermont, there are some state tax table updates there. So please go ahead and get that downloaded, that payroll update, as soon as possible, so you're current either on your tax tables and or with those other 2014 forms. Okay, we're going to come back and look at a little more at our website here momentarily, but I'm going to go ahead and just minimize that page and get back to our payroll module to talk about our reporting. First and foremost, how I decided as I was sort of formulating this webinar, trying to put it together, organize it, was, well, how do we go about organizing our payroll reports? How do we think about those? And for me personally, as a technician who supports it and, talking with as many users as I do on a daily basis about it, I was really broken down into ultimately two different categories. Tax reports and other reports, other payroll reports. And I really couldn't get it broken down into any other really sort of subcategories other than that. And so I kind of said, okay, well then, maybe I'm overthinking it and I'm trying to think of there's more into it than there's really here. And so that's really the way I've sort of constructed this webinar, is broken it down into what tax reports do we have built into the system and how are they used, and then what are the other reports that we have to deal with and can we use in Church Windows Payroll to help perform the job of a payroll administrator or what have you, to make our jobs easier ultimately. And so the first thing I want to sort of briefly talk about is our tax reports. And I'm not going to really spend much time on those. Those are things that we've just literally, all of us have gotten done, preparing, finishing up, what have you, for the end of the year, from the end of 2013 into the beginning of 2014. And then I'm going to spend the bulk of the rest of the webinar discussing our other payroll reports and then some other final things to sort of wrap things up. Of course, payroll produces our tax reports for us. Under our tax reports here and under this sub-menu that you'll see popping up here, we've got our federal and state and local tax table reports, that when we click on federal, and lots of folks are not even aware of this frequently, is that when we click on federal, here is our, 2013. Did I change the year? I'm so sorry. I was doing some work in there to get some things ready for this and I never changed it back. Let's back up. So payroll reports, tax reports, federal. So here, we notice that these are the federal tax tables for the year 2014. And this shows you the exact breakdown of what payroll actually looks at. These are the actuals, is what payroll looks at, is the percentages here. But if you want to ever see what the payroll tax tables or the federal tax tables look like for federal or state, they're right here. So these are federal for single or married. And then when we click finish and we go back to reports and tax reports, if you look at state, it will require, of course, that you choose your state by checking the appropriate state and clicking next, and that'll show you your current state tax tables. Okay. In addition to that, under our tax reports, we've got all of the, annual 944 form, for the annual filing for some tax filers or report filers, the quarterly 941 form that most of you submit, your FUTA and SUTA reports, federal unemployment and state unemployment tax reports, your W-2s and W-3 forms, W-4s, 1099s, and ultimately then your amended forms for things like if you need to submit an amendment to a previously filed 941 form, you've got, of course, your 941X, your W-2C, which is your amended W-2 form, and your W-3 for an amended W-3. So these would be forms that we would use for if we had ever said we had submitted or filed a previous form and we needed to submit an amendment or a change to that. Okay. So again, these are all things that we've done. You know, the 941 and the 944 are already pre-populated for us. You know, that's the advantage of using the Church Windows Payroll module is, you know, when we say do our first quarter for, you know, 2014, it does show that the information's all completed and filled out there, and all of the figures are all there, and again, based on your particular, you know, filing status. So if your deposit schedule is, you know, monthly, then you'll choose monthly from the deposit schedule, or if it's twice a month, you'll choose semi-weekly or quarterly, again, depending on what your deposit schedule with the IRS is. And if you're unsure, you'll need to contact them to find out. Okay. The same is true with regards to your W-2s and W-3s, is those are pre-populated and simply, you know, they can be printed or even printed from and submitted directly from Church Windows Payroll. All right. Again, I'm not going to say much more about that. There's not, you know, those are either right or wrong, and if they're wrong, we need to fix them, but they're the documents that we simply submit to our respective taxing authorities. What I will say about the tax reports for Church Windows is Church Windows Payroll does not include any state tax forms, okay? Those you'll need to obtain yourself, or maybe consider using the electronic filing and the NELCO wage filer in order to be able to submit or get your forms or file your forms or submit your necessary documentation to each of your individual states, okay? So again, Church Windows Payroll does not include any state tax forms whatsoever, okay? Honestly, I'm really probably not going to say too much more about the tax documents themselves or the tax forms themselves. What I am going to bring up or show you is how under Church Windows Payroll we do have the under our blog page. Again, if folks have never been to our Church Windows blog, we're going to choose, you know, churchwindows.com/blog. Here we are at the blog page. If I type in, let's say, guide, nope, it's not there. Where is it? Where am I looking for it? I'm sorry. Under support docs and links. Down here under support docs and links, we have the IRS tax guide for churches and religious organizations. This is an actual IRS document. I'm just advising that, you know, you'll want to look at this if you're unfamiliar with how, you know, the taxes and tax code affects your church and your employees. So just we're making you aware that the IRS tax guide and the link to it is right there at our website. Okay. This is a little known fact that this information is available right here at our website. Albeit I'm still going to do a plug for our blog page because it is very, 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 very helpful. And we're going to use that a little bit later on too. Finally, under our payroll module, again, hopefully everybody's aware that under your reports you do have your tax forms and your W-4. I'm not sure about, I'm not a tax professional, none of our folks are, I'm not a CPA, I'm not an accountant, but you know, just be aware you do have your W-4 form that some of you may obtain those updated from your employees every year, or you may want to, or if there is a change to the form, of course, then your employees should be providing you with an updated W-4 form. Okay, let's begin talking about some of our other payroll reports. You know, everybody's all familiar. We're all familiar with the tax reports themselves. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say about the web page at the blog page again. Was under our New Year Prep and Help page for more on the preparation of your tax documents. There is a payroll end-of-year movie that details, and the payroll tax reports movies right here. Let me get my highlighter out and steer some focus, okay? Right here under the end-of-year prep or New Year prep, right here on the right, we've got our payroll end-of-year and our 2013 payroll tax reports movies. This is why I'm not going to spend any more time than I am on this particular topic, okay? Is because there is already documentation that's available for any of you out there right now. So we don't need to spend time. So let's go back to our payroll module and begin talking about some of our other payroll reports. And what we're talking about here in most cases are these reports, things like our pay period earnings reports, pay period deductions, accounting transfer audit, health coverage benefit report. This was new to me this year. And so I'm going to definitely spend a few minutes on talking about this and what it means for you. You know, check register employee deductions, definitely some time on our history reports, okay? And certainly what some of these reports mean. So let's start at the top. You know, so if we sort of look at the others at the top as being basic information reports, pay period earnings, and these are reports that will frequently print during the payroll calculation process, okay? So I know that the pay period earnings reports do print out, or you are presented with an option to print pay period earnings reports during the pay calculation. The main difference is those that are printed pre-posting or before you post your payroll. These now here under the pay period earnings are those that you can produce after you've posted your payroll, okay? So if we click on pay period earnings, it allows us the opportunity, as many of our payroll reports do, to choose who do we want to run it for. For the purpose of our webinar, we're just going to do everybody. And then we go to next. And here is where it prompts us, as again many payroll reports do, to enter a date range. It will default to trying to choose a particular pay date or period, but we can choose, you know, any pay period we want or range of dates. So if I want to look at my earnings detail report from January 1 through April 30th or through February, I can do that, okay? And once we click next, it asks us, do we want to look at our taxable earnings and or our pay type earnings, okay? They are different reports and they do show different things. As we click next and look at our taxable earnings report, it literally shows here's our taxable earnings. It shows the number of units that are based on the date range that we've entered, or hours essentially. You know, so four in this case represents our salaried employee, and the larger figure for people like Jimmy and George represent our number of hours that they're entered. Okay. Also, it'll show us any, say, overtime, additional, or vacation or sick time units that have been applied or used, with the total number of hours or units that employees have been paid for based on that. If we go back to, like, say, an earlier period, and we say change that to 02/28, we're not there yet. I do have data entered for in advance, folks, so I could make sure we had something here for these reports later on. And we go to next and run that report. It's going to go show basically just how many units of each one of those each employee was paid for that particular pay date. It'll also show, you know, so in this case, Jimmy worked 45 hours on his February 28th pay, and George had worked 20, and everybody else was salaried. Shows their earnings without allowances for anyone that has allowances, whether that's a minister or not. Shows their total allowances they were paid, any Social Security wages that are reported, Social Security, Medicare, federal, state, and local. When we go to the next page at the top, and what I mean is this little down arrow right up here, a lot of folks have a hard time toggling back and forth between the various reports in payroll. So if I click on the little down arrow there, it changes it now to report page 2 of 2. So here now we've maximized that window. Let me get rid of my arrow there. So this is a report that just simply details the pay types, meaning were they paid for regular pay, overtime, additional, sick and vacation, total, what were their earnings. Again, here's their overtime earnings, additional, vacation and sick time, and any allowances. So literally, that's it. It just reports on what were they paid for again, during the date range or with the date that you'd recorded or that you'd posted it for. I mean, pretty basic and I think fairly self-explanatory reports, but they all can provide information for you that will prove helpful. And really, that's really not much more I can say about it other than that. Is each report provides us with different things. So if you've got a question about what was somebody paid for, and generally there's more than one way to report on it too, or to see it on reports. Well, I want to look and see what somebody was paid for a particular time, date on there. You can come right into this pay type earnings report and just choose the employee and the date, and it will show you exactly what you're wanting there. Okay. So let's say I do want to do that for just one employee. I can go back and I can go, okay, I want to look at Jimmy's record and his reporting for the full, say, 2014 year to this point. So it shows that he's been paid for 314 hours for the year. He's used 8 vacation or sick, been paid for 8 vacation or sick hours throughout the year for a total of 322. And here's his gross earnings without allowances. And here's how much is allocated for various taxing authorities for Social Security, Medicare, federal, state, and local. So you do have a good deal of flexibility with regards to what you want to see and who you want to check that for. Whoops, let's go to next. There was something I overlooked there. So that was just the detailed taxable earnings report. Here's the pay type earnings detail. So it just verifies his units, his pay. Here's his regular earnings, and then here's how much he earned or we paid him in vacation and sick time. Okay, let's go back and let's look at another report here. Pay period deductions, very important report. For a couple different reasons, and we're going to see that here momentarily. Again, we can choose specific employees if we want just one, or we can leave it for everybody. We're going to look at it for everybody. Again, you can enter a pay period or pay date range in from and to. So let's just leave it as our April 30th date. We'll pretend we're later in the year. So shows here our pay period deductions report. One of the things that I really like to clarify about this specific report is it is pay period deductions including withholdings. Okay, so technically the report name could be changed to pay period deductions and withholding report, but we've just sort of decided to lump it into one overall deductions reports. Deductions are different from withholdings. Withholdings are things we're obligated to pay to our taxing authorities, federal government, state, or local. Okay, but this report shows everything that is deducted or withheld from employees' pay. So in this case, for our employee pay period deductions report for April 30th of 2014, it shows that it was posted to the employee file. Let me grab my highlighter again, steer some focus. So it says it was posted, okay, who the employee is, shows what their gross pay was with any of their Social Security and Medicare amounts that were contributed or deducted or withheld, okay, and then there any federal tax. So clearly we can see, like for Larry and for Steve, no Social Security and Medicare or federal tax withheld. That's probably telling us that they're a minister. Any local tax, their gross pay less tax. Again, that's for both lay people and lay staff and for ministers. And with an entire breakdown of any deductions that employees have had money deducted for. Pension contributions, dental and health, insurance, could be anything that they are showing us deduction. If they're child support or something, it would show up here on this report. And if there are any advanced earned income credits, and then ultimately their net pay on the right. Okay. So, I mean, again, it's a really helpful report for, again, if you're wanting to look at deductions for either one pay period for an employee or all employees, or if you're wanting to look at the overall deductions for the year for the employees or employee. And it does provide some very nice totals here for us as well. But even more so, it does also provide us with the 941 deposit for the particular pay date in question, okay? Or the date range in question that we entered. And the reason why I'm stressing this is because as I was talking about it with other technicians and folks here before I started the webinar today, I was asking for input. Okay, what should we share with these folks about this today? And one of them very perceptively brought up that, if you're either unfamiliar with Church Windows Payroll or payroll for that matter for, a church or anything else for that matter, but the 941 is particularly new to you, make sure that you're entering the date range back here at this previous window with a date range that supports your deposit schedule with the IRS. So if your deposit schedule is semi-weekly, then you're going to be running this twice a month. So we'll run it for 01, or 0401 2014 through say 04 15 2014 to get the first half of the month pay. Okay, so here's our deposit for the first half of the month, and then when you're ready to come in and pay your taxes for the second half of the month, you would then change that to, the 16th, sorry, not the 15th, but the 16th through the final day of the month, in this case, April 30th, and then show that, and it would show whatever your new deposit total was for the second half of the month. Or if your deposit schedule with the IRS is monthly, you would enter it for the full month. Or if it's quarterly, enter it for the full quarter. Again, if you're unsure what your deposit schedule is with the IRS, contact them, find out what your deposit schedule is based on your EIN or your tax ID. They'll be happy to tell you. They don't want you to get into trouble, and they want to get paid. So, they're going to be happy to talk with you and answer even the most basic questions, such as what is our deposit schedule. So if you're new to Church Windows Payroll and you're unsure what that is, find out. You'll thank yourself for it in the long run. It could be certainly costly if you don't find out that information, and either you're paying your taxes incorrectly or maybe late in many cases. Okay, but just pay attention to your date range. Again, when one of those fields at the 941 form, when you're printing that, is what is your deposit schedule, and if you choose that, it's going to match up with that. So let's say our deposit schedule is monthly. So if we go to next here and we look at our deposit schedule, and it clearly tells us that for the month of April, our deposit total was $2,321.08. So what logic tells me on that is, and it does break it down, notice, into Social Security and Medicare and federal income tax, is that if I click finish through that, and I now go back to my reports and my tax report and my quarterly 941, and I run it, say, through the second quarter, because April is into the second quarter at that point, and I go to next, and here is our deposit schedule. Notice right at the very top, let me steer some focus right here, and it says our deposit schedule is monthly, and we'll leave it at that, and we go to next, and it says right here, our total deposit for this period is $2321.08. We've only got it calculated for the 1 month, and sure enough, when we go to page 2, April, or the first month of the second quarter, is matching our $2321.08, which is what our pay period deductions report shows us. So that pay period deductions report is helpful for not only breaking down what was deducted and withheld from our employees' files as well, but it does also provide and confirm our 941 deposit totals for the period as well. Very, very powerful report. I use that pay period deductions report on my support calls a lot. Okay. In addition to that, let's maximize this screen. It does break down what your total local taxes are for the period. Many times local taxes aren't paid for quarterly frequently. So in this case, maybe we would use the pay period deductions report to say backdate our local taxes for the quarter, and to see what was withheld for local taxes for everybody through the first quarter. So there we go. So here we've got our local tax breakdown. We can get those taxes submitted to our local taxing authorities. All right. On other reports, accounting transfer audit report. Boy, I'll tell you folks, I don't know what I would do without this report. Simply, it is a report that we've created that does help us resolve or confirm many times information as it relates to the accounting module. So it just simply tells us whether the payroll was transferred to accounting or whether it wasn't, and if so, what transaction numbers were created. Again, when I troubleshoot problems, payroll issues between payroll and accounting on support calls with you, I rely on this report to provide me with information that tells me what payroll thinks. Okay, it can tell you too. So it defaults to the very last pay date, but here's all of our pay dates throughout the year. So let's say I want to look at February 15th. I go to next. It then brings up a report. Let's maximize it. One of the most powerful reports in payroll as far as I'm concerned, because a couple different reasons. One, posted to CW here on the left. Notice here it's either going to say yes or no. That's telling us that the payroll that in question that we're looking at was either transferred over to accounting or it was not, as the case may be. Very important. If it says no, then that would explain why our, maybe expense accounts and our checking account isn't reconciling over in accounting, is that the payroll was never transferred over. Again, this is only what payroll sees. Okay. Secondly, it does provide us with the check number that was posted. It does, as will other reports like check register, but this does confirm. We can print this and go over and look and see if the information is confirmed in accounting. The employee name, very powerful information, is the transaction number here. Okay, the accounts that were debited and credited, what the amounts were, and what the description of the debit or credit transaction was. Okay, so I get a call on support that says, "Hey Josh, my payroll for such and such a date wasn't transferred over to accounting." I come right over here and I say, "Does this date appear in this list? And if it does it say posted to CW? And if so, let's print out this report, go over and let's look and see if those transactions are showing up in the general ledger or in our transactions in accounting." Okay, we might find that they weren't transferred. Or we might find out that payroll thinks they were transferred, but then somebody maybe went over and had manually reversed, even by accident, just accidentally reversed those payroll transactions mistakenly over in accounting. So this just tells us exactly what happened with regards to payroll as it relates to accounting. Well, my payroll taxes or my payroll pension credited to the wrong account. What does the accounting transfer audit report tell us? We can see clearly right here that that our 403B pension deduction was credited right over to a pension payable account in accounting. So it's always possible, of course, for there to be inconsistent data between the two modules, but to me, it fundamentally starts here. Is payroll will tell me or tell you and you exactly what what happened. Okay, including things like your EFT or your direct deposit payroll transactions here too. Okay, like I said, folks, this is to me a report that I would be really, really in a bad way as a technician when helping you try to resolve payroll and accounting issues as they relate to one another. Really learn to become familiar with this report. It will become one of your best friends. Really. I can't really say much more about it than that. It's the very last report that it prompts you to print after you transfer over the payroll over to accounting. Okay, so as soon as you transfer it over to accounting and that window pops up and says, "Do you want to print the report?" This is the report it's going to print. Okay, it can always be reprinted later, but it would certainly be one of the reports that I would probably print a hard copy of each and every time I calculated my payroll. Maybe not. It's a really important report. That's all I can state about it. Other reports here. Group Term Life Report. Basically, this is just a report that I don't think I even have anything calculated in here for Group Term Life. But would be a Group Term Life report with any Group Term Life taxes, life insurance taxes that had been or earnings that had been entered and calculated for any of your employees that had Group Term Life insurance paid for above the certain dollar amount. I don't think I have any in here. Let me just double check. Nope, no records meet it. I think maybe I might for last year, but that's okay. It's a pretty standard report, and only if applicable if there's Group Term Life taxes or earnings which are in play. Health Coverage Benefit Report. This is new. Okay, and this is one of the ones that I was sort of new to, and I had to get up to speed with today, or this earlier this week, but so I could sort of instruct you as to what it does and what it means for us here. Um, what I was able to determine or find out about it was that this is probably there's pending legislation and changes about this that is going to be requiring more of this. So we're really trying to get more of a jump on what we're expecting to be changed with regards to the government requirements here over the course of the next year or two. Okay, but it has a lot to do with the changing face of health coverage as it relates to us as a country and a nation. And employers as well, of course. And a lot of it, the Affordable Care Act is impacting this as well. But simply at this point, it's an amount that can be reported on the W-2 and included in your tax documentation for how much the employer, you, the church, in essence, it may be paying into health insurance coverage on behalf of your employees. Okay, I actually have posted a transaction in here for us for about that today. And notice it does offer a date range. In many cases, it might be something that, some churches might come in here and calculate this transaction once a month. You could come in and calculate it quarterly. You could come in and calculate it annually or post it annually. At this point, there's really not a requirement to enter it at all. But some folks are wanting to get a jump on that, sort of like we are on that. So you can calculate it any time. It is simply informational, okay? And so if I go ahead and change that, say let's run that through December of 2014, and I click next. I'm sorry, let's go back. I think I entered something for 2013 for this. I try to be well prepared, folks, but even I forget things from time to time. All right, so let's do that as of 12/31. And sure enough, here we have something in here that for our pastor, Larry, we had posted that the church had paid $3,157.94 worth of coverage benefit on behalf of the pastor. That wasn't a deduction from their payroll. That was not their deduction towards contributions towards health insurance. That was not a reported or taxed amount included in their wages, as far as I'm aware. It is simply an amount that we've said we've paid in on their behalf. And how that appears is under our tax reports, W-2 forms. If we clear all and we check Larry, we're going to click on the government or informative copy. And this is all done systematically, and I'm going to walk you through the calculation of that here in just a moment. It shows up right here in 12A with the double D code. Okay, that's just simply handled and dealt with for you systematically when you calculate this at the end of the year. Okay, well, so you're probably thinking, well, Josh, how do we go ahead and take that? So take care of that so it does show up here the way if we want to report that. Okay, it's not being again added into wages. It's not being taxed. It's not going anywhere other than in box 12A with the double D code. Okay. So how we do that is we would go into, the amount. We have to know the amount, of course. But then we would go into payroll, and then right down here at the very bottom, we see the post-employee health coverage benefit. Okay, and so let's change our year back, say to 2014, and click apply and OK. We go to payroll, post-employee health coverage benefit. We would enter the date. The system generally automatically defaults to the last day of the year, so that's fine. We can do that, but you can do it quarterly or monthly if you wish. And then we would choose who we're wanting to calculate it or to enter that amount or post that amount for. And so we would go to choose the employee, click next. It says health coverage benefit amount, and we can just type in the amount of that. Click next. Do we want to preview the report? Do we want the health coverage benefit report? If we click that and choose that and click next, one of the things I always stress about these reports that you print during the calculation process of anything in payroll is entries have not been posted. That's the main difference between printing these reports during the calculation process as opposed to afterward. Okay, so The same reports that you can print out during the calculation process can be also printed after you posted those. So if you don't like that those entries have not been posted on there, wait and print them until after you've posted the payroll, or the entries in this case. So here it's confirming that for us. We click next, and we're going to say post to payroll as of 12/31/14. We click finish. It says cost of employer-sponsored healthcare coverage posted successfully. And now when we go in and we look at the tax report, or the W-2 for Larry for 2014, now don't pay attention to the year because that's not updated yet. And we click next, and sure enough, there's our health benefit amount right here. Okay. Again, this is an informational figure only at this point. It's been basically how it was described to me was that it's a way for us to be able to inform our employees how much we as the employer have contributed towards their health insurance coverage on their behalf. Okay. It's, as far as we're aware, the government is not tracking this information, but, who knows? Who knows what they're tracking about us anymore or not, as the case may be. But again, even though that's not required, we are expecting or anticipating that there is going to be some change in legislation with regards to this, and there may be some requirements in terms of how that's being recorded and posted and showing on your tax forms documents for both your employees and for you as the employer. And so we, as your software provider and developer, will be keeping up with that and get those implemented as they are given to us. And so for those of you that have been working with us for some time, know that we work to get those updated requirements into the system as quickly as we possibly can, and certainly by any deadline dates, by meeting any deadline dates that are required. Okay. So stay tuned. There will be maybe more of that, and our payroll system will certainly be implementing those as they are required. Okay. More reports. Check register. Again, it's a fairly standard report. Again, it's a register of all of your checks that you've paid, the checks that have been written to your employees, throughout the year that are through payroll. Posted, yes. Check printed, yes. Again, a lot of folks are unaware that these reports are here. They think, oh, it's just a standard check register. No. This shows, was it posted to payroll? Did we print the check? What was the posted date and the pay period ended and the check number? Who was the employee, and what was the amount? Okay, so these reports are chock full of useful information that, based on your personal preferences, may be helpful for you, while they may not be necessarily useful for somebody else. Okay, but just take a look at them. There doesn't hurt to take a peek. Okay, but it is a check register. It's a register, or a report of all the checks that have been posted and paid to our employees. Employee deductions and allowances are literally as they're described here. I'm kind of trying to breeze through these because I want to get to our history report before we wrap things up here. We've got about 20 minutes left. Our employee deductions. These do zero in and focus specifically in on the deductions for the employees, again, for the date range that you enter. So here, if we say it is defaulting to February, that's we're in the month of February on our computer. So we just leave that and click next. It literally does break down each one of the deductions as they occur for each employee. Not withholdings, not taxes, just the deductions that they're either required to or voluntarily paying into that are not taxes. So pension and health insurance and dental insurance and anything else that was being deducted from their pay. And notice nice at the bottom, totals section. So it does show you the totals that were deducted. Again, this is only what payroll sees. If deductions are things, again, that are deducted from people's pay or employees' pay, then under our reports, our allowances, employee allowances, then would be a report that shows the allowances that were paid to employees. Allowances, of course, are described as monies that are paid to a person or employee that are above or beyond or separate from regular base pay. So frequently ministers will have housing allowances that are paid to them. Notice here we've got for Larry, automobile reimbursement and a housing allowance, and the same thing for Steve. Lisa also, it's showing the amount of the allowances that are paid to these folks. Allowances we've instructed for many years are also often great ways of being able to maintain a single employee file for an employee who maybe does or performs multiple jobs at the church. So we've got a person who's, our organist mostly but then on the other part-time they're our music director. So an allowance that we might set up their main job as a as the organist, and then we would set up an allowance for their music director position, and we can run a report here to see how much they were maybe paid as the music director. The allowances will also appear on their pay stubs. So again, a very useful report, again with the totals figure at the very bottom. Local taxes, again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I know not everybody's subject to local tax, but again, it's a total or the summary of local taxes that are paid or withheld from employees' taxes or pays for the date range in question. So if you have local taxes and your employees are subject to those, you can use this local tax report to see exactly how much was withheld for local taxes and their respective taxing districts and oftentimes school districts or municipalities. Okay. And again, these reports here also include summaries and totals. Nice breakdown for each one of the local taxing authorities. Very helpful. All right. Let's move on to our history report. Dun, 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 dun. Our history reports here are very, very helpful and very informative. I use them again a lot on my my support calls when again helping users answer questions about information that may be appearing in certain parts of payroll. Not very much helpful with regards to accounting, but they are certainly helpful with regards to helping us answer questions in payroll. Payroll history report is really more of a summary format, I like to say. Again, you can choose it for one employee, specific employees, or everyone. Again, it defaults to bringing up or wanting to bring the whole date range, the whole year's date range into it, but I can run it for one date, a range of dates, or the whole year. The report styles are important because it can put all of our employees onto one report as a group, or we can break it down into individual break it down by individual employee. So we'll leave it as group history report for now. So if we click next, it then literally does show all of our pay broken down by month and quarter for all of our employees. Gross pay for January, Social Security withheld. Notice here that the amounts in parentheses here does point to or indicate at the bottom in the legend here is a gross taxable amount for the deductions above it. Okay, so the total amount of Social Security gross pay, the 688 figure is based on gross pay wages of 11,106. Same for Medicare. Federal taxes, again, how much federal tax was withheld, how much state tax, local, and net tax. Any deductions or allowances, advanced earned income credit amounts, and the total net pay and our 941 amount. I think the benefit of these reports personally comes in that they are broken down or separated by month and ultimately quarter, and then ultimately a year-to-date total at the very bottom. So clearly what we can see here is we've calculated payroll in our training data for the first quarter and then for the month of April. This will also help us maybe determine when maybe we've got a missing payroll sometimes. If the pay is consistent, regularly, then these gross pay amounts are probably going to be fairly consistent, broken down by month. If we got a month where a month looks particularly low, that might be pointing us to a month where we have a missing payroll. Okay. Yeah, when we've got questions about broader periods, I'll use this on my reports a lot of times. Let me maybe get rid of those drawings there, because that probably maybe just getting your folks way about that is helpful. But when I have broader questions about either, again, a user calls me and says, hey, Josh, for the month I've got a question about this, or for the quarter, I'll use this report. The more detailed reports might be something like, sorry, I'm trying to change my drawing tool here, folks. would be under our reports in history report, our federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail. But before I come back to that, I want to choose the employee detail hours report. Again, can be run by one employee or all, can be run for one date, a range of dates, or the whole year. Again, can be run for everybody or just by individual. So if I do group history report, it does, here's my pay dates, the total number of hours that we had recorded for them or posted, any overtime hours, additional, vacation, basically it's pay type in terms of what folks were paid for that particular period or date range. Okay, in this case I've done it for the whole year. Also does show unused vacation and sick time. I've calculated 8 hours of sick time for Jimmy, our custodian, and he never had any to begin with. So I'd either need to calculate an adjustment to fix that, to give him, vacation or sick time to start the year, or I'd need to address that and go in and maybe, reverse or void and correct my payroll. But individual history report breaks it down by employee. So if we go to next here after changing it to individual, notice it's now producing 9 pages of reports up here at the very top. So 1 of 9, and here's my employee Larry. Here's each pay date that he was paid, the units, in this case he's salaried, any overtime, additional, or vacation earned, or sick time earned, vacation used, and sick time used. Very helpful when wanting to look at employees, what they've been paid for essentially. So if I go to page 2, here's Jimmy, and I think I'd said earlier that I had, maybe it wasn't Jimmy that I calculated that for. Whoops, sorry folks. Somebody I'd calculated the vacation time for. Maybe I didn't enter the broad enough date range. Oh, I did. I entered it the whole year. Well, that's okay. I'm not going to spend much time looking for it, but it would be in here if it were. All right. With about 10 minutes left, I want to talk about a couple of other things. The other final history report, and this is the one I use all the time on my support calls a lot, is because much of the federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail, because it most closely can be matched up with figures that are on my 941 report, okay, or even in many cases the W-2 form. Okay, so if I go ahead, and it does default to try to running it for the whole year, but if let's say I've got a question about my 941 totals for the first quarter, I can run it from January 1 through March 31st, again defaulting to group history report versus individual. And then when I go to next, it does, let me get rid of those annoying drawings here, defaults to bringing in, notice that the pay date is showing 115 several times and then 131. This is again showing the date for everybody that I'd calculated and posted a payroll for during the period that I had or the date range that I've requested. Okay, so I'm going to see the same pay date listed multiple times when choosing the group report. Okay. But then ultimately when I get to the bottom, it does show me what my earnings without allowances are, any taxable allowances if there are any, non-taxable deductions, federal taxable compensation, reported wages essentially, all federal taxes that were withheld, Social Security, Medicare withheld taxes, state and local withheld, taxable deductions and non-taxable allowances with the net check and any check and the check numbers. Notice here on the right I've got EFT for my direct deposit employees. These figures right here definitely can be matched up with my 941 totals. Okay, so these figures literally can be matched up right on my 941 based on the respective, the boxes on the 941 where they should. One of the things that we really want to stress about this report is, notice here on the left side next to my pay date, we see those little asterisks. The footnote at the bottom clearly says, indicates a change has occurred in the federal taxable status of the deduction and or allowances used to calculate and post the payment to the employee file. Okay, so that is, even the asterisks are pointing specifically to certain pay dates where that's in play. Okay, so what that's telling me is that there are certain and specific employees that are affected by this. Okay, so more than likely, what this might mean is, so basically what I did was I set up the structure of an allowance or a deduction for my employees. I calculated some payrolls for them with that structure or that setup. Then I went back in and I changed the reportable or taxable status of those allowances or deductions, essentially then changing how that's going to report or taxes are going to affect those deductions or allowances. Okay? Not that this is not permissible or even necessary. Happens a lot. But what it does mean is that you would, if you did warrant or the change that you did make was required or necessary, that you would probably need to go into payroll and calculate an adjustment to correct whatever you changed for both your 941 and your W-2 forms for your employees, so everything was reporting properly. And it also might warrant or require that you submit an amended form to submit to file an amendment or a change to a previously filed 941 for a quarter where maybe things were wrong. Okay. So yeah, you would want to definitely look at things like, and what I would do would be to probably look at things like our taxable allowances, non-taxable deductions, taxable deductions and non-taxable allowances. Okay, and then go back into each one of those employees and take a look and see what have I changed on that and make the appropriate changes. Okay, see who had deductions. And I think I can pretty much safely say that if we were to go through this without even printing it, that if we go into payroll, well, we would probably go to our reports and go to our allowances or employee deductions and allowances. Okay, so we would go to allowances, we would go here, we'd probably go back to 0101 through 0331. Again, we ran it for the first quarter, and go to next, and we clearly see here Larry, Steve, and Lisa all have allowances. So I would want to print those out, then go over to their employee file and look at those and see if there was anything I needed to make any adjustments or changes to and correct those. The same might be true if I go into my reports and my employee deductions, again running it for the first quarter, printing out a list of the employees who had deductions that I had posted, again going into their respective employee files, looking at those and comparing those tax documents to see what had changed. More than likely, based on what was there and the fact that it was basically 2 employees, logic tells me that those might have been just allowances that had changed. But I'd have to go into the information and use the system information that the system provided for me to tell me that. Okay. It does sometimes require this. That's the result of what happens when we change something after mid-year, basically midstream. Okay, so again, keep an eye out under your federal taxable earnings, withholdings, and net pay detail that when you run the report either by individual, because it will show up for individual, that would be the other way to find out on it too, would be, yeah, clearly here. Larry, our senior minister, he was one of those where that's in play. Okay, where those changes to those deductions or allowances were definitely were affected. Okay, this report is really, 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 really powerful, and I can't stress using it enough. Use it to your advantage. It really will help. The federal taxable earnings withholdings can be again printed for each separate employee. I use it constantly on my support calls. Okay. Just be aware, changing something like a deduction or an allowance, after the fact might require some changes occur historically. All right, final couple of things here in the last 4 or 5, 6 minutes we have here is, folks, if Church Windows under System Administration, delete employee contractor does have a delete employee contractor function. Okay, if you decide to use this feature, please, when you delete an employee contractor from the database, it deletes it entirely. There's no way to go back and recover the information. So if you decide to delete employees and contractors and purge them from your system, please be sure to print out or have copies of the W-2 forms for them that included them, and any employee reports that included those deleted records. It's the only way you'll be able to provide, if you're contacted by the IRS or the SSA after they're gone and you've deleted them, you have nothing, okay, other than any other records you have. So please make sure you're printing out the appropriate copies of the forms of the documentation for previous years for any employees that are deleted, okay? You'll thank yourself for it. It might take a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes to go back and print all of those forms for those folks, even if they're in the informative copies or the government copies of those, but it could save you oodles of headache time later on. Secondly, before we wrap things up, here's why I wanted to go to the blog page earlier, was www.churchwindows.com. Blog. This year, the government has implemented the new document numbered the 8822B. So if we go to blog, enter it here, IRS form 8222B. This is there, as it clearly describes here in the center. It says there's a new IRS tax filing requirement as of January 1, 2014. It requires your attention. It states that if any entity with a tax identification number must notify the IRS of changes to its responsible party within 60 days. So if there's been a change of staff over the course of the years, and when the original EIN or tax ID number was requested, they're now saying who is the responsible party for recording essentially payments to the church. So if we click on that, it then opens up an actual nice blog page, and it does actually take you to a link to view the actual document. Okay. You may want to take a look at that today as soon as we're done today. Okay. Finally, with one more minute, folks, the 941 form for 2013 or 14 will only be implemented in the service release for Church Windows Payroll that will come out at the end of March. So if we go to your tax reports and 941 form and we run it for any quarter, it doesn't matter when it is, notice it says in the top right here, 941 form for 2013. If you do not install the update for payroll that comes out literally in the last week or two of March every year from us that updates that form, you could be filing the wrong 941 for the wrong year. Okay, so make a note for yourself. We send out emails to everybody about it, but there's generally some that get overlooked, or they don't get the email, or they get blocked. But please, please, please make a point of paying attention to that 941 form at the, for the first quarter before you send it in, and go to the website and install that that first service release or next service release that will include that 2014 941 form. We hope it's been helpful. I'm done talking about what I need to talk about. Thank you very much for attending.